I had worked for 3 years to finish my adult degree. Night classes, working weekends, barely sleeping. But I finally did it. I graduated. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to celebrate. I reserved a small hall at the community center and invited only close family. Nothing extravagant, just a few candles, coffee, cake, and framed photos of my journey from exhaustion to triumph. That night, I wore a dark blue dress I'd saved up for. I even let myself feel proud for a moment when I stood up to give my short speech. My daughter Molly smiled at me from the corner, and my husband gave me a discreet thumbs up. I had just started thanking my professors and my late father when my younger brother, Adam, stood up behind me. "Hey, sorry to interrupt, but I just got the news," he said, practically glowing. "I've been accepted into Yale Law." There was a pause, and then applause. Chairs shifted. My aunt ran up to hug him. My mother teared up and said, "Oh, Adam, I always knew you had it in you." No one even asked me to finish my speech. By the time the cake was cut, I was forgotten. They were already talking about dorm tours and scholarships. My graduation photos were taken down to make space for a Yale banner someone found on their phone and printed at the front desk. I drove home that night in silence, even as my husband muttered about how he could have waited one day. But I didn't cry. I didn't say anything. Not yet. The next morning, I awoke early. I hadn't slept much, replaying the evening in my head. The applause for Adam, the flash of my mother's proud tears, the way my graduation cap ended up on the floor behind the punch bowl. I wandered into the kitchen still in my robe, intending to make coffee and shake off the bitterness. But the shouting started before the kettle even boiled. It was my mother's voice, high, sharp, frantic. I peeked out the window and saw her standing on Adam's porch across the street, her phone in one hand, her other hand waving frantically. She wasn't alone. My Uncle Ron had come out barefoot, blinking against the sun, while Adam stood in the doorway looking like a scolded child. I could only make out fragments. "How could you? Do you think I'm stupid? Your father would be rolling in his grave." I opened the front door a little to hear better, but it didn't help much. Only one thing stuck. "Fake! This whole thing is fake!" And then the slam of her palm against something, maybe her own forehead, and the unmistakable thud of a door closing hard. Adam retreated inside. My mother stood on the steps for another few seconds, staring out into space, like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. I stepped back inside slowly and shut the door, heart pounding. I hadn't moved from that spot when, 5 minutes later, my mother banged on my door. She didn't wait to be let in. "He lied," she hissed. "Adam lied. There's no Yale, no acceptance letter, no application. He made it all up, and he used your graduation to do it." My first reaction wasn't surprise. It was something colder, heavier, something that settled in my stomach like a rock. I said nothing. I simply nodded and made her coffee. It wasn't until she left that I sat down, alone in the kitchen, and whispered, "Then let's make it all about me, after all." That was the moment everything began to shift. By noon, everyone in the family knew. My phone buzzed non-stop. Aunt Linda sent a shocked, "Can you believe this?" text. Uncle Ron called and asked if I'd known. I told him I hadn't. He didn't sound convinced, but the most telling message came from my cousin Brenda. "Honestly, I'm not even surprised. Your mom always gave him everything. Maybe now she'll see it too." That stuck with me. Growing up, Adam was the miracle baby. I was the accident. My mother never said that outright, but I didn't need her to. She showed it every Christmas, every award ceremony, every time I got a B+ and he got a nice try. When Dad was alive, he tried to balance things. But after his heart attack, she poured every ounce of her attention into Adam, like he was her second chance. I got used to it, or maybe just numb to it. But now, her golden boy had made a fool of her. Publicly. She stayed quiet most of that week. Wouldn't return Adam's calls. Told the rest of us she needed space. But then, on Friday, she texted, "Family dinner, Sunday night, everyone, no excuses." The message felt like a summons. Sunday came, and I dressed simply but deliberately. Light blue blouse, subtle earrings, hair down the way my father used to say he liked. I wanted to feel like myself, but not invisible. When I arrived, Adam was already there, sitting at the far end of the table, pale and jumpy. Mom hadn't looked at him. Not once. The silence was ice. Dinner started politely. Too politely. My mother served her signature roast chicken and potatoes, but barely spoke. Halfway through the meal, Adam cleared his throat and tried to apologize. I didn't think it would go that far. I thought maybe if I pretended for a little longer, I was going to figure it out. Eventually. I'm sorry. Mom didn't blink. You humiliated me. He looked at me, maybe expecting backup, but I held his gaze, then took a sip of water. You humiliated her too, I said quietly. The room stilled, and just like that, something subtle shifted. For the first time in years, my mother looked at me, really looked, and said nothing, but her eyes weren't angry anymore. They were searching, and I knew, in that silence, that something had cracked open. 2 days after the dinner, I found an envelope in my mailbox with no name on it. Inside, a check for $3,000 and a note in my mother's handwriting. I should have helped you more. Use this for something you want, not something you need. Mom. I stared at it for a long time, not because of the money, though I knew she hadn't given Adam a cent lately, but because of the sentence. Something you want. No one had ever said that to me, not in that way. I was the one who managed fine, the one who didn't need help. Adam needed everything, or at least he always made it seem like he did. That evening, I booked a consultation for something I'd wanted since I was 22, but never dared to pursue, opening a small learning center for adult women trying to finish their education, like I did. It wasn't revenge. Not exactly. It was more like reclaiming what was mine. My voice. My path. When I told my husband, he blinked in surprise. Finally, he said, it's about time. The next few weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, site visits, and late-night planning. I didn't tell the rest of the family, not yet. I wanted to do this on my own terms. But one afternoon, as I was leaving a property in the old part of town, I ran into Brenda, my cousin. She was walking her dog and waved me over. After a bit of small talk, she said, "Everyone's talking, you know." I braced myself. "About Adam?" She laughed dryly. "About you. About how you finally spoke up. Aunt Laura said she didn't know you had that in you." I didn't know either. That night, I lay awake thinking about all the years I had been quiet to keep the peace. All the birthdays overshadowed, the report cards dismissed, the silent swallowing of pride. I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. And when I told Molly, my daughter, about my idea, she simply said, "You'd be amazing at that." No hesitation. That's when I knew. It wasn't about proving myself to them anymore. It was about choosing myself. I signed the lease 3 weeks later. The space was small but full of light. An old bakery with peeling tiles and a back room that could be converted into a quiet classroom. I used part of the check for the deposit, and the rest came from savings I hadn't touched in years. It was terrifying, and it was mine. Molly helped me paint the front wall a soft gray. We stayed up late designing a logo together, a simple open book with the words Bright Path Learning Center beneath it. She said it sounded hopeful, not preachy. That was exactly what I wanted. I didn't tell my mother yet. I wasn't ready for her questions, or worse, her silence. But news travels fast in families, especially ours. Brenda must have said something, or maybe Uncle Ron drove by the storefront. Because the next Sunday, after church, my mother called me. "You're opening a business?" she asked, not coldly, but not warmly either. "Yes," I replied. Pause. "You didn't mention it." I wanted to do it without making it a family thing. Another pause. Then, "I see." She didn't ask what it was for. She didn't offer help. But I could feel her thinking, chewing on it. That night, she sent me a one-line text. "Your father would have been proud." It hit harder than she knew. The following week, Adam came to see me. I hadn't heard from him since the dinner. He showed up unannounced, looking thinner. Humbled, maybe. He stood in the unfinished doorway with a paper cup of coffee and a plastic bag of scones. "I heard," he said. "Thought you might want a break." I stared at him. "You didn't come here to apologize again, did you?" He shook his head. No, I just figured if you're building something real, maybe I could at least help paint. I didn't answer right away, but I did hand him a brush. He painted the baseboards in silence, carefully, like he had something to prove, but didn't know how to ask for forgiveness out loud. And I didn't give him an audience this time. I didn't need to. By mid-April, the center was ready to open. I held a soft launch, no fanfare, just a few folding chairs, some printed flyers, and coffee in a borrowed urn. Molly stood by the door, handing out pens. I'd expected a trickle of women, maybe 2 or 3. But 12 showed up. 12. They weren't polished or loud. They came with quiet eyes, tired hands, and notebooks from dollar stores. Some had children. Some had baggage heavier than backpacks. All of them reminded me of myself. I taught the first class with trembling fingers. I told them what no one had told me when I started. You don't have to prove you're worthy of learning. You already are. Afterward, one woman, her name was Patrice, stayed behind. She looked about 60. Gray braids, kind but guarded face. You were the girl in the blue dress, she said suddenly. I blinked. I'm sorry? At the graduation party, I was working the desk that night. I remember how they all walked past you. My stomach tightened. I'm glad you're doing this, she said, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. For them. For you. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. The next day, Brenda showed up. She peeked into the classroom, eyebrows raised. So it's real, she murmured. It's real. She leaned against the doorway. Aunt Laura's been quiet about it. Too quiet. Which, usually means she's trying to figure out how to make it hers. I sighed. It's not hers to take. No, Brenda agreed. But that's never stopped her before. That evening, my mother called. I was thinking, she began, careful and slow, that maybe we could do a family dinner. A proper one. Here, this weekend. Just us. Just us used to mean Adam, front and center. Now, I wasn't sure what it meant at all. I'll come, I said, after a pause. When I hung up, Molly looked at me. You don't have to go. I know, I said. That's why I will. The house hadn't changed. Same lace curtains, same creaky front steps, same ceramic swan planter by the door. But as I walked in for the dinner, something felt different. My mother greeted me at the door with a brisk hug. You look tired, she said, the way she used to, except this time it didn't sting. I wasn't here for her approval. Inside, Adam was already at the table, dressed neatly, hair combed back like he was attending a job interview. Brenda arrived just after me, bringing her usual lemon tart and a cautious glance in my direction. Dinner started quietly. Roast chicken again. I wondered if it was symbolic or just habit. It was Adam who broke the silence. I'm applying for a community college program. Real one this time. Brenda smirked but said nothing. Mom gave a small nod. That's good. I looked up. Why law school before? Adam shifted in his seat. Because law school sounded impressive, and I wanted everyone to look at me the way they always looked at you. Silence. I was always chasing something you had, but I never wanted to admit it. You worked. You didn't just wait around for things to fall in your lap. I felt Molly's words echo in my head. You don't have to go. But I had. And now I understood why. My mother set her fork down. Maybe we all made mistakes. Maybe? Brenda muttered. I thought I was doing what was best. I thought if I focused on Adam, you'd be fine. You always were. No, I said, not harshly, just firmly. I wasn't. Her face faltered, not from anger, from the slow, creeping weight of realization. I know now, she said quietly, but knowing now doesn't fix what I didn't know then. We sat in silence for a moment, and then she added, But I see you now, I do. There it was, not flowers, not a banner, just a sentence I had waited a lifetime to hear. After dessert, she asked if I'd bring some flyers for the center next time. I didn't cry, not then, but I felt something inside begin to unclench. By May, word about Bright Path had spread farther than I expected. What began with 12 students was now 26. Some sat on fold-out stools when chairs ran out. One woman, Denise, Offered to teach math on weekends for free. Just until things stabilize, she said. Another brought secondhand books in perfect condition, sorted by subject. The space was too small, but it was alive. One afternoon, while organizing supplies, I heard the bell over the front door chime. I expected Patrice, or maybe Molly, but it was my mother. She stood in the doorway, holding a tray of sandwiches and a glass jar of homemade pickles. I figured people might not have time to eat, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. I motioned her inside. The students thanked her, some awkwardly, not knowing who she was. But Patrice walked over and shook her hand warmly. "Your daughter's doing something important," she said simply. My mother flushed. "Yes, she is." Later, after the class, we sat quietly in the office. She scanned the bulletin board where I'd pinned handwritten notes from students. "First time I felt smart in years. I read to my kids last night and didn't stumble once." "I wish I had done something like this," she said, surprising me. "You still can," I said. She laughed. "I can't teach anything." "You could make lunch." She looked up. "You'd let me?" "I'd let you." It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation, but she started showing up every Tuesday and Thursday with a casserole dish, or soup, or pasta salad. The women called her Miss Martha. She didn't correct them. Adam, too, began volunteering quietly on Saturdays. He didn't pretend to be someone else this time. He hauled boxes, updated spreadsheets, and listened when the women spoke. Then came the letter. A manila envelope, hand-delivered from the county. I opened it, confused. My chest tightened as I scanned the words. Zoning variance application denied. Without it, we couldn't expand. We couldn't stay open. I stared at the page. It wasn't a mistake. It was signed. Brenda called later that night, her voice tight. Someone contested it, officially, and I know who. I already knew too. Not my mother. Not Adam. Someone from the community who didn't want this kind of space to grow in that part of town. And I was not going to let them win. The name on the complaint wasn't unfamiliar. Norma Wallace, longtime resident, head of the local beautification board, and someone who once told Patrice, to her face, that women like you are better off learning trades, not books. She lived 2 blocks from the center and had never once stepped inside. But she'd seen the women coming and going. Women of all colors, ages, body types. She didn't like that it was growing. She didn't like that it was working. I stared at the document in Brenda's hand. She called it a nuisance business, Brenda said flatly. She says it's increasing traffic, reducing property values, and making the street look, quote, unpredictable. Unpredictable. That word stayed with me all night. By morning, I had decided. I wasn't going to beg, I was going to fight. We filed an appeal. Adam helped with the paperwork, and Brenda helped me draft a letter to our students and their families. Molly created an online petition. In 48 hours, we had over 700 signatures. Then came the stories. Patrice spoke at the town board meeting. She described how the center helped her finally earn her GED at 62. "No one here makes this place worse," she said. "We walk in here with our heads down and leave standing taller." Denise stood too. "You call this a nuisance? I call it the first place that treated me like I wasn't disposable." Even my mother came. She didn't speak, but she stood beside me the whole time, holding a container of oatmeal cookies in her hands like armor. When it was my turn to speak, I looked directly at Norma. I spent most of my life thinking I didn't matter unless I stayed small. Quiet. But small doesn't help anyone. We are not here to lower your property value. We are here because we deserve to exist. A few people clapped. Most didn't. That was fine. I wasn't there for applause. The board promised a decision within 10 business days. But I already knew. Even if they said no, we weren't stopping. We'd move, we'd rebuild, we'd go louder if we had to. Because they'd tried to ignore us before. And that didn't work, did it? 10 days stretched like 10 years. We didn't stop operating. We couldn't. Women still came, still learned, still needed space to breathe. Each day felt both defiant and vulnerable, like we were building on shifting sand. Then, on a Thursday morning, the letter came. I held the envelope in my hands for nearly an hour before I opened it. The board has reviewed the appeal and hereby reverses the previous denial. The Bright Path Learning Center is granted a zoning variance to continue operations at its current location. I exhaled for the first time in days. My hands shook. Molly jumped up when I told her, throwing her arms around me. "You did it." "No," I said. "We did." That night, we held a celebration. Not a party, just a gathering. Patrice brought a cake shaped like an open book. My mother brought lasagna and wore a little name tag that read, Miss Martha. Adam made a slideshow with before and after photos of the space. The center was still modest, but it felt bigger somehow, firmer, rooted. Later that evening, Brenda found me standing by the window. "You know Norma won't give up, right?" she said. I smiled. "Let her try. We know who we are now." And I did. I wasn't the girl people forgot at a graduation party. I wasn't the quiet daughter who kept her head down so others could shine. I wasn't the one who had to prove her worth anymore. I was the woman who built something and kept it standing. As we cleaned up, I noticed something taped to the wall above the light switch, a piece of loose-leaf paper with neat handwriting. "Thank you for changing my life. I didn't think people like me belonged in places like this. Now I do." No name, no need. I tucked it into my bag and didn't say a word. It was enough. The next morning, as I opened the front door of the center, a new student stood on the steps, nervous, holding a binder too tightly. "Hi," she said. "Is this Bright Path?" "It is," I said, smiling. "You're in the right place." And for the first time in my life, so was I.